I'm Clint, and welcome to the Vibrance After Show live stream. This is the first time we've done this, so I'm going to just be killing a little bit of time for people to join in live to the chat, and I will be taking your questions. I just need to double check that all my settings look good here in the live. And if you have some questions you want to toss to me dealing with habits, health, attitude, or if you want to jump over and talk about some art stuff, art industry questions, anything on that line, I would be happy to take those. So I'm just looking here to see what it's telling me. Invalid request. I don't know that that's going through. I'm getting conflicting information from the streaming program and from YouTube. Okay, apparently it's going through, and I was not able to, can't hear. All the audio is turned up. Okay, it's good now? Oh yeah, I don't know. We were getting a glitch from somebody, but I think it's good. OBS is saying I'm not dropping any frames. Audio levels are coming through. So there we go. Yes, so sorry for the delay getting into the proper introduction, but this is the after show to the Vibrance episode on the one tip for positivity, the one word change for positivity, and dealing with have to, get to, and that word change really bringing about a perspective of thankfulness rather than obligation. And I think that is really important. The mental life that you have going on up here is a dramatic factor in how you go about living your day-to-day life. Not just how people relate to you and the opportunities that you might get in life, but also just whether you enjoy your day, whether you find yourself being happier. And there's a big link between happiness and thankfulness. Just those people that are reported of having, those people that report being more happy are also very often the most grateful people that you'll meet. I don't know why the audio's low. I literally have the mic maxed completely out, and OBS is completely maxed out. Yeah, that's everything. That is literally as loud as I can make it. So hopefully that's understandable. There we go. So I don't have a lot to cover here. I just wanted to make myself available to talk about this or related subjects for anybody that wants to toss me some questions. As I savor my little root beer that I picked up across the road. I have been working with a friend on a book dealing with neuroplasticity. And I am going to be doing probably a series of short videos dealing on neuroplasticity. And if you're unfamiliar with that, what that is, then you're exactly where I was 6 months ago. Neuroplasticity deals with the brain's ability to be malleable and to rewire itself. Plastic is the idea. It is literally the plasticity of the brain being able to change itself and its structure based on how you treat it, how you use it, and surrounding situation. I will start a story on that just to kind of kill some time before we get some questions coming in. Let me tell you a story of where it all started. It started with this guy named Paul Baccarita. Back in I want to think it was around the 50s or early 60s, somewhere around there. This fellow was a young medical guy in the field, and I guess I could put neuroplasticity in here just as we're kind of going. Plasticity. And his father had a stroke. Now, his father was a professor, very smart fellow. He was about 65 or so at the time, and the stroke just really debilitated him. Took him down to the point where he was practically what you call a vegetable. He couldn't speak, he couldn't hardly move, and they did a couple of weeks of physical therapy with him, but he didn't do much. So he and his brother thought, well, we don't really want to put him in a nursing home, so I'm going to try to work with him and see what we can do. And they thought, well, I don't know much about this, but I know that when you're a child and the child is going to learn how to walk and become an adult and be able to do all the adult things and grown-up things, that you have to start real easy. You start real simple and let the brain start to wire itself. And so that's what they did. They got their dad pads for his shoulders, his elbows and his knees, and they just started working with his body to teach his body how to start crawling again. And they would like roll a ball to him, and his dad would try to catch it and roll the ball back. And over months and months, he just started getting more function back and more function back. And as the body began to have more control over itself, then he also began to gain more ability to speak. And this was pretty amazing, because if you know what a stroke is where a blood clot stops blood going to certain parts of the brain, and that part of the brain dies. You can't use it anymore. So it went on to the point that the dad pretty much fully recovered, and he ended up taking his job back up as a professor at a university, and he started going hiking again. And he died several years later from a heart attack, which was pretty unrelated. He was also up there in his age. But afterwards, the son had the son had an autopsy performed on his father. He was just curious, as a medical person, what kind of damage his father's brain had suffered during his stroke. So he reports that his friend was doing the autopsy. I guess she was the coroner. And he went down there and she said, "This is amazing, essentially. This is almost unbelievable." And they went down and looked and see the brain goes down, and it kind of goes down into one little bit there in the back that goes down into the spine. Before it becomes the actual spine, it's the brain stem. And that 97% of the brain stem and that nervous system there was dead. Only 3% was left. And the brain rewired itself to the point where he brought all of his ability to walk, talk, speak, and function to only 3% of the remaining neural area. And that basically started off Paul Baccarita going, if this is possible, then anything should be possible with the brain. And he got a lot of kickback from the medical community that said, no, the brain is fixed. There's this area for the brain that does this, and this area of the brain that does that. And he said, no, it's not. The brain is completely malleable, and we can rewire it to do whatever we need it to. And he went on to create this device. I don't know if it had a proper name, but he wanted to prove the brain's plasticity by giving a blind man sight. So they found a guy that was blind his entire life. He was born blind and could not fix his eyes. That was not an option. So he created this little pad that had nodes on it, a collection of small electrodes, very, very low voltage. We're not talking about actually shocking you. It's just a mild tingling. And they fixed that to a camera. Then that pad went on to the top of the person's, I believe they used the tongue at that point. I think they've since used the top of the mouth, but I think on there it was the tongue, and they put it on the tongue. And it was kind of like pixels, so that if the camera saw something that was light, then they got a little sensation here on that particular electrode. And then if they saw something, brighter or darker, and so it kind of mapped the vision to these electrodes, and then those signals were sent into the brain. And he's saying that the tongue is basically the perfect non-sensory sensor. And you can send a lot of signals to it because it's very sensitive, and it also doesn't have the layer of skin. It goes straight to the organ. And with this guy that was completely blind, after a while of using it, he was able to throw a ball into a can 10 feet away. The guy had never seen it in his life, but his brain started getting these signals and realized what it could do with these signals and wired itself so that his tongue became his eyes with the help of this thing. And so anyway, neuroplasticity, it's super awesome, and it even goes into what we're going over in the video, which is your brain will literally change its structure based on the positive or negative thoughts that you have. And it will also increase or decrease the literal size of your brain by the quality of the thoughts that you think. All right, got some questions coming in. Aowa says, Swatches, you need to move your screen over because I cannot read that whole question. Okay, let's do that. Aowa says, not Vibrance related, but next week closes the challenge. Did you already decide what the next will be about? No, I haven't. I'll do what I did last time, which is I will write up 5 or 10 different ideas. I'll throw a poll out on the Swatches group, and then everybody can put a vote to it. We got a really good feedback for the double feature on the last art challenge. So if it's pretty well split, I'll do that again. But if there's a clear leader, then I'll probably just go with the one. Someone asked, Swatches, question, I saw your reference book recommendation video. In your experience, how long did it take you to be good enough for a commission? Let's see. If we're talking about, I guess the first commission I took was from a friend for $5, and I drew him a picture of Genos from Super Mario RPG. So I was about 12 at that time. If you're talking about professional, then it's one of those things that I practiced traditional art for probably a good 5 years, and then I started getting some portrait commissions, and I did that for 2 years. And then I did graphic design for years, and then I got back into art and started taking fantasy commissions for fantasy games and that sort of thing. And so it's like, I guess you could include, the 5 years of study through high school. Then I had some years that some time that I studied during the whole graphic design time frame. Then I put a good 2 years into my portfolio in between that and trying to get work. So somewhere around the 7 to 10 years, I guess. But I also picked up a variety of small projects along the way. So it wasn't just like there was this one day where, oh, now I'm professional. I don't know how many pieces you have to take at what price before that legitimizes your professional status, but there you go. Awa says, oh yeah, that video is great. Are there other books you'd like to add to the ones mentioned there? The ones mentioned in the older episode? Okay, are you talking about art books, or are we talking about like self-growth books? I like the Vibrance episode. Thank you, Avidite. I'm probably not saying that correctly. Sorry. What do you think was the best thing to do studies before you started to get commissions? I think studying portraiture and classic art, or I would say classic art, traditional art, learning drawing, painting, watercolors, pastels, that sort of thing. I think they really gave me a good basis to start my professional career, and I would recommend that. I also found doing some art challenges and contests very helpful, because I had to learn how to work from somebody else's outline. So that was good. Other studies. Some of the studies that I found helpful was to do, I'm not sure what the name of it is, if there's a proper name for them. I kind of consider them countdown studies. That's where you have a subject, and you can do something as simple as find a Google Maps photo, right? There's some sites out there where you can just it'll randomize a Google Map location, street view, right? And you say, give me a location, and it'll bring up, oh, here's somewhere in Nigeria, I don't know, Scotland, wherever it gives you. Then you've got to paint that scene in 20 minutes. Then you go take a 5-minute break, and you come back, and then you paint it in 10 minutes. Take a 5-minute break, come back, and paint it in 5 minutes. And that can be really helpful, because what it does, well, it teaches you how to establish the most important information first and quickly before you get bogged down in the details. And by taking a longer time first, you kind of familiarize yourself with the scene. You get the idea of the arrangement and the how to block it in, and you get familiar with what is actually important in that scene. Then you have time to practice that by lowering the times. Gesture studies, gesture sketching, always a good idea as well. Douglas asks, what do you do if you are lost in your art journey? Okay, can you expound on that? Like, you don't know what to do with your particular piece, or you don't know where to go with your art, or you're not feeling motivated. There's a lot of ways that I can come at that question. So try to clarify that for me, and I'll answer it for you. I refer to the video on book recommendation. Okay, I think you're talking about the older episode where I talked about inspirations and books that I liked that were art materials. Wow, that's been a while since I did that episode, and I'm trying to remember which ones I talked about in that. And I think I gave you quite a few of my favorites. I was running through my head of what's on my shelf, and if I've added anything new since then. You were just wondering if are there other books? There were several art of books that I've picked up. The used bookstore. When I go down to Texas, they have a lot of good used bookstores down in that area. I picked up The Art of Star Wars Episode 7. I was looking at that one actually today, and that's got a really good collection of art pieces. Some art of books are mainly just production photos, and they don't really have that much art in them, but that one is really excellent. I also picked up The Art of Ghost in the Shell, the live-action movie that came out a couple of years ago, and I've enjoyed that one. That was pretty good. any of the other ones. I don't pick up that many instructional books anymore. I'm just not at a point where I do that much. But those two are good. I'm going to have to come back to you on that one, I imagine. I'll have to take a look at my shelf. I just don't remember offhand some of the good ones that I've looked at. But good question. I'll have to make a note of it, and I'll try to come back to it. Maybe we can address that next Friday during the live stream. Someone asks, I'm currently pursuing a degree in computer science, and I'm studying art on the side on my own. But from what I observed, if I to be good at art requires a lot of commitment. Yes, it does. It's a job like anything else, or it's a hobby like anything else. And that's the simplest way to look at it. And that is, if you treat it like a hobby, it'll pay you like a hobby, which is it will take your time and it will take your money, but you'll probably enjoy it. But if you treat it like a job, it'll probably pay you like a job, and you might enjoy it like a job, but also a bit like a hobby because you enjoyed it when you got into it. But it is a serious amount of time to learn. It is not something that you just fall into, or most people don't. And it is a skill that takes a lot of time to learn. And there's really not any way around that if you're trying to do, realistic commission kind of work. I guess if you just were trying to do abstract, fun stuff, then not so much. But yes. Now, I don't want to say that to dissuade anyone, because if you do enjoy it, if it is meaningful to you and whatever you are doing is not, then I would say that you should seriously consider making a change. Like I said, I did graphic design. I was in graphic design doing book layouts and book titles and websites and that sort of thing. I was doing that for years, and about 5 years in, I just really didn't enjoy it anymore. I did not find it very meaningful. And although I was able to charge a pretty good rate per hour, it just wasn't worth it. I didn't find it engaging. I needed to be able to stretch creatively in a different way. And even if that meant like a cutback of time and a loss of hours on the weekends and at nights. So I spent a couple of years and I built up a portfolio to do that. And, you're at a point now, it sounds like you have a lot of split between what you want to do. Now, you don't have to quit one thing to do another thing, but it wouldn't hurt in order to kind of just outline a education plan for yourself. If this is something that you want to consider a bit more seriously, then consider outlining a plan, or just schedule yourself for an online course. There's a lot of courses, workshops, that sort of thing, and get into it. And, tell yourself, maybe this is my plan. I'm going to give myself 1 year to pursue this, and I will set aside this much money to invest in my education. I will invest an average of this many hours or this day a week I'm setting aside for it. And then, maybe that's 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever that time frame is for you. And then you can come back to that afterwards and say, all right, is it what I thought it was? Do I still like it after I put this much time into it? Do I see enough progress that I could reach a level that I want to be at in a time frame that works for me? And that would be a good way to have a bit more seriousness on the idea without just jumping out of the boat and hoping that there's some, other boat to land on. Kind of like jumping out of computer science and just crossing your fingers that art is going to catch you. Hopefully you find that helpful. Some ideas there. Avid says, if anyone wanted to become a concept artist in 4 years and you laid them out a path to follow, what might that look like? Excellent question. Yeah, sorry, bump the table. If I was to lay out a 4-year plan to get to be a concept artist, the first thing I would probably do is I would skip the computer to start with. I would recommend people starting with just pencil, paper sketching. And I would have them sketch a lot of basic shapes, learn how to draw basic forms. I would get some classic books like How to Draw What You See, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, because what you want to do is step up their observation skills. And you want to have them to have very good observation skills. And that is key for an artist, because just being able to see something doesn't mean you're understanding how to observe it correctly. One of the practices that I have done with students many times in classes, on the first day of class, I will have them sit down and I say, okay, nobody can get up, nobody can move, but now I want you to just draw a tennis shoe. Without looking, just draw your regular tennis shoe. And it quickly becomes apparent they don't know. Like, they know the kind of the shape of a foot, but it doesn't look like a shoe. And it's because people can see things and recognize them, but they can't. They can see things and recognize them, but they don't properly observe them in a way that allows them to recreate that thing. And so probably starting with traditional media, then I would go into making sure that they have a lot of feedback from teachers. If there's a good local class to go to, then that's an option. Otherwise, there's a lot of good online classes looking at something like Mark Burnett's art school. I think you probably have to have a decent level of drawing, so I wouldn't say that, in the first year. There's a lot of just foundational drawing. Of course, you want to go over the art fundamentals first, and once you have those down, I'd say go into doing things like maybe the CGMA computer course that they have, Mark sort of thing, maybe doing consultations, kind of mentorship, like some of the stuff I offer, which is just scheduling it when you need it for feedback. The other thing that I would do for a good outline is go look at Noah Bradley's post on his blog. And that's a really good outline. He outlined a $10,000 art education course, or I think it's less than that. And it's somewhere in that, several year plan. And I would recommend people go look at that. Noah Bradley, I believe it's Noah Bradley, yeah. And his IMHO $10,000 art education college blog. And if you didn't go to art college and you wanted to save a lot of money but get the same or better education, and he had a list of, I'd take this course, I'd take this course, I would read this book, and I would probably tweak that outline a little bit, but that would be a good framework to go off of. Someone asked, my question is, I want to shift my commitment to art, but I'm scared of the risk. Should I do it? Well, I kind of touched on that. I don't know if you... Okay, it looks like I answered that, earlier during your other question. But it brings up a similar question that I've had before, so I'll go ahead and address it real quick, which is, when should I switch so that I'm doing my whatever career, and I'm starting to take some little projects on art on the side? At what time should I, end my other job and start on art full time? I'd say 50%. If you are making 50% from your art on the side of what you're making in your full-time job, it's probably pretty safe to switch over, because then if you're putting your full-time into your art, it seems likely that you could bring it up to 100% of what you were making from your previous job. Douglas says, from previous question, in terms of self-growth and motivation. All right, I've got to go up and see What do you do if you are lost in your art journey in terms of self-growth and motivation? If you're doing your art journey and you're finding you're not growing as much as you want, you're not as motivated as you want, what do you do? A couple of things come to mind. One is, I find people don't have as much growth as they want are often the people that are not pushing themselves as much as they should be. I'm sorry, I've got this notice up here that keeps bugging me. It's like, it's time to update this. Like, go away, you're bugging me. So I see a lot of people that get kind of discouraged or like, I feel like I'm not really improving. But they're also the same people that only do small studies. And when they start a big piece and it gets kind of difficult, they stop and they go back to doing little studies. Like, oh, I'm going to just copy this hand out of Bridgman. I'm going to just copy this head out of this other book. And that is a way to really just be kind of spinning your wheels. It makes it feel like you're doing something, but you're not advancing as much as you should be or could be. So in that case, I would say push through. Make sure that you're doing a good deal of studies, practicing smaller studies, learning about specific things, but then you need to do a larger, more involved piece that's going to take longer, and you have to finish that. Push through that. Even if it turns out that it's not as good as you want, what you need to do is learn how to implement that knowledge into a full piece. There are things that you can learn by doing small studies, and there are things that you learn by taking a piece from start all the way to finish. Because if you're only doing the initial part, then you never get to practice the actual execution of details and the more involved, later end of the image. So make sure you're doing that. Another thing that I see people getting kind of demotivated is when they're not getting personalized feedback from an instructor, or some sort of instructor, whether it is a local teacher that teaches at the college who's teaches some weekend workshops. We have art stores over in Nashville, and they have people come in like once a week to teach, a little painting class. Yeah, even something like that, just being around some other people painting, getting some direct feedback on your work, that can be very motivating. So that could be good. Think about that sort of thing. Another thing is, motivation-wise, you have to celebrate the small victories. And I'm planning on actually doing a upcoming Vibrance episode on this topic, which is, it is easy for us to recall failures. It is easier to recall failures than it is successes. If I think back over the last couple of years, it's easy to remember times that I hurt or I failed or any kind of negative memories, but it's a little more difficult to remember as many positive memories or as many successes or accomplishments. So make sure that you take the time to actually give yourself a little pat on the back and say, that was good. I'm proud of that. That was good. So just see if you can work some people around you, get your friends, your family, whoever you can be open with, and tell them, all right, I would really appreciate it if you could just tell me I did a good job on this. It was hard to do this. And just have them like, that was a good job. Congratulations. And it might seem a little awkward, odd, unusual, but try to get a little good feedback. Something else you can do is start making a little accomplishments notebook. You do something of some significance, and it doesn't have to be great. It doesn't be like, oh, I just landed my first, major gig. It could just be, I finished my 50th portrait this week. That's pretty cool. 50 portraits? Awesome. Put that in there. I practiced gouache painting for the first time. Congratulations. You know, put that in there. And what that's going to do is every time that you get to write in a little accomplishment, it's going to give you a dopamine hit. And the dopamine makes you feel good. That's where little app games, they get you with the dopamine. Like Candy Crush, right? You make the combination, bing, the colors connect, and it gives you that sound. And that sound gives you a little dopamine hit, and it gives you a little high. So it sounds like you're probably not getting enough of that. And so celebrate the little victories. And yeah, there we go. Okay, super late. Got to go, says Awa. Have a nice stream. Thank you. Well, Awa, thank you for joining. Appreciate your questions, and hopefully you found it useful. Can you mention a self-taught concept artist who has had success in the industry? I believe Brad Rigney was self-taught. And he does, he does concept art. I was going to say, I'm mainly familiar with his illustration, but he does concept art too, and he is freaking amazing. I love his work. So Brad Rigney, Rigney. He also goes by the name Crypt Crawler, and you can Google for his stuff. It is freaking amazing. And I watched one video of his where he was painting a character and kind of showing his painting process. And I believe he said that he was self-taught. So I'm sure there are probably many others, but that's the only one that comes off the top of my head. Scrolling down, I know that I'm kind of behind on some of these. Olga says, I know a lot of art theory and I can probably teach someone on it, but I can never seem to apply said theory in my works, which really puts me off drawing. Any tips on tackling this? I know a lot of art theory and I could probably teach someone on it, but I can never seem to apply the theory. Can you, kind of without more details of being able to see it, I'm not sure how to go about answering that. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but based on what I know from that, it sounds like you might not know it as well as you think. But I also know that it is easy to have blind spots. There are things that I miss in my own work consistently. There are things that I go back and I look at my other work. And, sorry, I was approve something being shared there. So you will always have blind spots and things that you go back and like, how did I miss that? Those lines were totally not right. We're having a tangent right there. And I always talk about not having tangents. But aside from that, I'm trying to think of a good reason why that might be. One of the reasons it might happen is because you're not doing enough work. You're not drawing enough or often enough. And I've seen that play out where the person doesn't draw very often. They read a lot of books and they've watched a lot of videos, but having the mental knowledge and being able to actually incorporate it into your painting process is another step. Just taking in the information doesn't automatically mean that it's going to become part of your ability. For instance, I could say that I wanted to learn Taekwondo. martial arts, taekwondo. I could sit here and I could watch the teacher explain and show me all of these moves. Can I then instantly get up and perform everything just as he said it? No. Well, why not? He gave me all the information. Yeah, but I actually have to internalize that. I have to make that part of my system now. And if you're not consistently applying that information, then it's not really there yet. So I would suggest, let me backtrack. Often people in that situation will maybe draw one image a month, an image every couple of weeks, an image every couple of months. It's not a daily practice. And then because they don't actually draw that often, they actually have raised nerves and they expect themselves to perform really well. And with that expectation comes a nervousness. And those conditions are really good for making you forget things and making you overlook things. You're not performing at a comfortable, casual, relaxed, enjoyable way. And so the brain kind of freezes up and you miss stuff. All right, I think I covered that good from what I can get from the question. Oh, I need to scroll back up a little bit here. Delacroix says, what is a good exercise or exercises that help you push your... Oh yes, loud motorcycles. I've got a motorcycle shop place right over there, so we get quite a few down this road. What is a good exercise or exercises that help you push your gesture or simplification or stylization more? I struggle with exaggerating my portraits and anatomy proportions. One good way, of course, is just doing short gesture drawings. You can go to a lot of different sites that have time gesture drawings, and it will come up with a random image. You will have 30 seconds or whatever time you set on it, and you can do it that way. That's a good way for practicing. But for me, that's kind of where I am too. Stylization is actually difficult for me. I've trained for so long how to do things very accurately and proportionally correct and all of that, that it's difficult for my mind to stylize and to twist and to simplify in that way. So I usually have better results if I can have a couple of examples. Now, I'm not drawing any of the examples. I just want to see how somebody stylized a face, somebody stylized a body, that sort of thing. And it just kind of helps get my brain in the right direction. So have a couple of those inspiration images over next to where you're drawing, just to kind of reaffirm. Something else that I found useful is exercises with basic shapes. So, like you start with the shape of a head, all right? But this is an odd shape, not a normal shape. Like you do a square, you do a triangle, you do a lopsided diamond, that sort of thing. And then you draw the features into that face. You make that shape into a head. And that can be a very good exercise for learning how to twist anatomy into really cool kind of shapes. So I recommend that one. There are some people out there that do really good examples of shape exercises and the kind of things that they come up with from that. Reach the Swede says, how do I get my portfolio reviewed by you? Well, what you would want to do is go out to art-mentor.com and schedule a consultation. You can schedule either a 30-minute or 60-minute consultation, and we will have a one-on-one video chat going over whatever you want to about your portfolio, your education, any particular piece, any questions that you want to throw at me, we can answer during that time. And I currently have Tuesdays and Wednesdays from like 4 to 7 p.m. my time opened up for consultations. I believe next week I had those 2 days open. And I will be opening more, but there's a chance I need to make a trip that following week. So until I know whether or not I need to be making that trip, I haven't opened the dates up past then. But stay tuned, and that would be the way to do it. The other way would be if you wanted to join one of the art challenges. I wouldn't review your portfolio, but if you submitted an image for the art challenge, then I would review your image during that. And if you became one of my $40 patrons over on patreon.com, then you would normally submit in an image of your choosing, and I would record a feedback video. But I have also allowed people to say, instead of me submitting an image, could you do a portfolio review instead? And I've done that in the stead of doing an image review. So those are all your options currently. Sita says, really enjoying this stream. We'll visit more often. Well, Sita, thank you for joining. Appreciate you stopping in. Missed something. Someone says, I rush a lot when I'm doing art practice because of the time constraint. Most of the time I ended up reading the entire book but didn't get the essential points. Make sure if you're reading an art book, if it's not just really theory-based, that you're doing whatever exercises they're talking about in there. Or if they're talking about how to capture a certain kind of lighting, then do a little study on that lighting. What you can do is actually have a notebook, and you have a notebook for every art book you go through. And so you do a collection of drawings, sketches, little paintings, whatever it is, for all of the things in that notebook. So if you're getting, one of Gurney's, imaginative realism, and he's talking about maquettes and painting from the maquette, then go get some Sculpey and make a little maquette and then do a little painting of it. And then that will really internalize what's going on in that part of the book. You will remember it because you put it into action. Delacroix was saying, I don't know if it's a he or she, but they saying that they have forgot about the shape exercise. Sometimes I do that when I'm just killing time, if I'm traveling somewhere or when I'm playing. I just start making some little random head shapes and trying to fit features into them. Another one I've done, it's in my character design ebook, which is the T between the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and just changing the shape of the T and making features that fit into that shape. There was also a book out. I got it from Kickstarter. You can purchase it, I think, standalone, even after the Kickstarter ended. I cannot remember the name of it, but it is the human body in 100 different styles. So they went to 100 different artists and had them to draw the unclothed male and female figures in their style. And I think it's front, side, and back of each one in each style. And that's pretty interesting if you're trying to figure out how to stylize something, because every single person drew the same subject, a man and a woman, but each one accentuated different things, and they stylized it in different ways. And one person would stylize, the arm up into the shoulder, and the other one would make sure that they included, a different shape for the shoulder or the bicep, and just, some person does a lot of circles, some people use a lot of triangles, and you can just flip through there and just see a lot of variations of how to go about doing that. If somebody remembers the name of that book, put it in the chat. I don't remember. It's like, I honestly don't remember the name of it. Esri says, Swatches, how long in advance can one buy a ticket for the challenge? Is it enough just becoming a patron? Patreon and the art challenge tickets aren't connected anymore. I had put them to being part of Patreon, but they're not connected anymore. So you need not be a patron in order to get a ticket for the challenge. And being a patron doesn't give you any kind of heads up or advantage in getting the ticket. The tickets you can't buy them in advance. When they become available, you may purchase them. So next Friday will be the last stream for that, the last episode for that particular challenge, and then we'll kick off a new challenge. And the tickets should become available, I'm planning for that next day, that Saturday. And there will be 12 tickets available. So I will share when the tickets become available, and I'll put that out on the Swatches Facebook group. And then you can go follow that link and purchase one. Avid says, Clint, any advice on what to draw or do if you feel like drawing, but if you get a blank canvas in front of you and you're just drawing blanks or not sure what to draw? Yeah, everybody hits this sometimes. I don't know, maybe you just didn't sleep well, a little low in energy, whatever the case. Sometimes you're not just brimming with creativity and energy, and you're just like, I'm not sure what to do. I would recommend some of the more automated things where you don't have to decide the subject. The subject is provided for you and you're just doing studies of them. So things like gesture drawing, also portrait sketches, the same sort of sites that do like the timed gesture drawing. You can do timed portrait sketches. I personally enjoy those quite a bit. And you can just put like, oh, okay, I want to do 2-minute portrait sketches, 5 minutes, whatever. Probably not anything too long, otherwise you're really going to get into having to do like lots of shading and details and stuff. So keep it pretty short, like 5 minutes or less. And just say, I'm going to do 30 minutes of that. And it's going to be time well spent, and you're not going to have to really bust yourself dealing with composition and color and all that. So simplify it down. So I'm just going to do some pencil sketches, and you don't have to worry about a lot of the other stuff about building a complete image. Also, I can't remember the name of the exact site, but the Google Maps Street View, there's one that's been set up for artists that gives you a random street view. And usually if you just go through them a couple of times, find one that you like, it'll give you some interesting place in the world. Some of them are just like, it's not well lit, or there's just a bunch of cars in the way. It's not something you really want to draw. But there are some cool castles and just hills and mountains, or interesting way that the light came through some tree there. And do a little time study of that. Or get something like that. And then that's also a great time to do experiments with brushes. It's like, what, I haven't tried using a square brush. So paint that scene in half an hour just using a square brush. That's a good way to practice. Or you pick, some other kind of brush. You use, or pick, I'm going to try these 3 new brushes, and I can only use these 3 new brushes. Or doing the same thing with color scheme. So you pick a unusual color scheme, then you've got to paint this other reference image in this this unique, different color scheme. All right, that's cool. So there's just some ideas. That ought to get you started. Someone asked, can you elaborate on shape design? I don't understand the principle or theory behind it. Well, there is a... anytime anyone shares a link in the chat, I have to approve that, because you never know what some people are going to share. So I have to take a look at it and make sure it's legit before it goes to everybody. So if you see me pause and reach down, that's probably what I'm doing. Can I elaborate on shape design? I don't understand the theory or principle behind it. There's a lot of ways that can be taken. Shapes have connotations. All right, this is one of the things I talk about in my character ebook. and I have some examples for it over there. So that is, rounded things are generally seen as less threatening. Pointy things are seen as more threatening. Now I'm just giving you one example, but shape, language, and design goes on beyond that. So, for instance, if you wanted to make an aggressive, evil necromancer character, then you probably don't want to give him lots of big rounded shapes on his body. He's going to not look very threatening. He's going to look soft, like a big plush, So what do you do for those characters? You give them big pointy things coming off of their shoulder. You get him pointy horns coming off of his helmet piece. You give him a staff with lots of blades coming off the top of it. And that's one of the ways that shapes affect the way that you design things. You can do the same thing for environment. Buildings that have lots of harsh verticals to them is a different impression than a building that has ivy growing all up the side, and it has archways built into it, and has beautiful round windows. And that is a much more inviting, pleasant sort of approach. So that's one of the things. Also gets into composition using shapes. And, I can't remember which one of the guys it is that has a video on composition shapes. Is it Lucid? Is it over on Lucid Pixel? Is it his? One of them talks about it. I would go out to YouTube and look for improving your shapes and composition. And there's a whole thing about, in your image, it's like simplifying things down to shapes. And then it's finding a balance of shapes and having a variety of shapes. So you don't want all of the objects in your scene to be the same size, because then there's like no visual hierarchy or priority. You don't know which one's important. But if there's a large shape, then you want to kind of balance that out by having some medium and small shapes. And you can use the size of the shapes to also help tell distance in the image by having like maybe a big, a big shape up front and then smaller shapes as it goes back. That helps tell distance. So there's a lot of stuff dealing with shapes in that way. Hopefully I gave you just an inkling of kind of where that goes. Master's Anatomy is the book. That sounds, that might be right. Master's Anatomy? Yeah, that could be it. Nagatama says, hello, Clint. I want to know, how do you come up with the props for all the challenge? They were all so creative. No fancy answer to that one. It is either I see an image that I, came across online somewhere, and I just thought, oh, that's kind of cool. I wonder if we can do something similar to that. Or I just sit down and I think, if I could paint anything that I wanted, what might it be? And I also kind of filter that through what would be potentially of interest to the most people in the group and fit well in most portfolios. So I try to find something that will check all those boxes. If it's only going to be of interest to a couple of people and only going to fit normally in a couple of portfolios due to subject matter or style, then I'm probably not going to include it. But if it's of something that people will be like, oh man, that's cool, I'd like to do that, then that's a good one on the list. So I kind of just use a gut reaction on that. I also try to find something that I might be able to have some decent examples or inspiration pieces for. And I usually want to have at least one, if not multiple, of the options dealing with people or figures or characters, because those are always popular. Yeah, random street view, and you can save your favorite locations with the button and the URL, instantstreetview.com. Yeah, any ones like that. And there is also a group of people out on Twitch that do, I think they're weekly kind of group drawings based on the street views. There's one streamer out on Twitch that I've watched a couple of times, and she did it, Maddie. I believe it was Maddie, Maddy. Now, she comes on early for my time because she's actually over in the Netherlands. So she's like start streaming way early before I get up, and then she ends shortly after I get up, just hour-wise. But she and several of the other streamers do a group where they all go out and they find a street view image and then they paint it that day. So you might go check out her Twitch and figure out, I think there's a link on there to the group or to a Discord, and you might have fun going out there and joining in something like that. And that can be a good way, just stay a little motivated, kind of connected, share ideas, that sort of thing. Marco Bushi has a good one on the shapes in your composition. That sounds sounds right. I'm sure he probably does. That might be the one that I'm thinking of, Marco Bushi. About anything Marco has is good. I've never watched a video of his and I thought, no, the guy knows what he's talking about, and he's a good teacher. Masters of Anatomy is the book. Yep. Okay. Wanted to ask if you have any tips on drawing armor. I love knights, and I feel a bit stuck on drawing cool and realistic armor. There's two main things about armor. We're going to talk about drawing armor, and that is its form and its execution, right? It's how does it work? What's the three-dimensional form of the object, and are you painting it so that it looks like the material that it's supposed to be made out of? So there's two kind of different ones there. On the form side, actually designing the armor, I'm really going to suggest you have good historical references to go off of. Armor is a very tricky thing, and it needs to be drawn and designed in a way where function is believable. And it has to look like it can be put on, it can be taken off, that it can bend in all of the ways necessary for someone to actually wear it and, perform battles. And a lot of people or amateurs don't do that. They make too many solid pieces. I actually recorded a video this afternoon for a patron where we were talking about something very similar to this topic, and that is try not to use a lot of solid pieces. Make sure that you have points of articulation, so joints where one piece joins to another one, like adding a joint along the top right here so that the breastplate and the back plate can bend. It's making sure that the shoulder piece is not attached to the chest piece. It's making sure you understand how the elbow can work and the different kinds of ways that armor can be made around to protect the arm while it bends in multiple ways. So I'm going to suggest if you do some practicing, just draw simple forms of the historical armor, and then you can fantasy them up. But get familiar with how you can bend armor around the human form and it remain believable. So yeah, function is really big on that, believable function to the armor. And then look at some fantasy armor just for ideas of how you can kind of twist it and take it from there. And then learning how to draw metal. Now, I have a couple of videos on drawing different kinds of metal, like shiny metal and old brass and darker metal. You can check out some of those. There's a lot of tutorials online, even simple little tutorials on Pinterest about how to draw metal and armor, that sort of thing. So you can check those out. Drawing cool animalistic armor. Yeah, also check out some of the concept art for games like For Honor, and some of the Dark Souls, those sorts of games, and see about those, because they do a really good job of creating interesting, believable, but also cool kind of fantasy armor as well. And if you haven't looked out on Pinterest, you can just put in fantasy armor and you're going to have thousands of really cool images to get ideas from. Someone says, how do I practice color theory? Should I start designing with color first or values? Well, values are always going to be more important. If you can have one or the other, you want values over color. But practice color theory. I don't want to just promote myself and my stuff, but I have a PSD available. You can go out to my store. It is absolutely free. I just want it available to anybody that wants it. All it is nope, that's not what I meant to hit. It's just a color wheel, and you can rotate the color wheel around. So it's a color wheel with all the different colors in it. And you can rotate the color wheel around, or you can rotate the mask around on the color wheel so that only certain colors are available. Now I have a different mask, one for analogous, one for complementary, split complementary, square, just all the different kinds of different color schemes. And try painting the same scene with multiple kinds of color schemes. Not just different colors, but different kinds of color schemes. So like, you can only paint with the colors that are in that open area. So like analogous, you can only paint with any 30% area of the color wheel. And then maybe you also paint with, excuse me, that root beer. Then you paint with just one color. You have a monochromatic, and then you play around with a complementary where you're using color from one side and the other side, but you're not using any of the other ones. And if you do the same scene with multiple color schemes, then you start kind of clicking in your mind what the options are and what the strengths and weaknesses of each one of them is. I have an ebook on color. If you want to check that out, it has a full breakdown explanation of all that. Also, make sure you're checking out the Art Fundamentals series here on the channel. If you have not watched the episode on colors, that's worth watching as well. Kind of go through some of that as well. And there also might be a link on that video where you can go download the thing that I'm talking about. Yeah, that would be a good place to start. Yeah, you should be doing first. If I was doing an image, this might be the way that you're talking about. If I was doing an image, I would block out my values probably before I'd block out what my colors would be. But there's always going to be a give and take on that. So if I found a color scheme I really liked, and it would work better if I adjusted the value scheme to go along with it, then I would consider doing that. So the two work in tandem. But I personally usually think of the value scheme and what I want from it before I think about the color. Mon, I know you have accents on that name, and I don't know what those accents mean as far as pronunciation, so I'll call it Mon. You say, any tips on rendering hair? Many people enjoy the process, but I always find it hard. One of the major problems on drawing hair is people think about it as individual strands. And that is often, does not give you the most compelling hair. So say that you have a head. What you want to think of from hair is it as ribbons. Right? So hair usually clumps together, and it follows similar patterns. So make sure that I'm hitting the right key here. So like on this, you want to have the hair coming down in ribbons, and thinking about it like it's just like a piece of paper or a piece of fabric. And it's going to be playing all together. Now, there's going to be some variance. Maybe it pulls out a little bit at the bottom where the gravity's pulling on it, and it separates out a little bit. And you're going to have some little fringy ones that want to kind of loop over each other or whatever. But basically, you're going to have one major ribbon, and then you're going to have the little separate ones that kind of go around that. And even, as it goes back here and, like around the ear and stuff, and again, you're going to just have multiple layers of ribbons, as some of them are really curvy, maybe as they go back in here. And they're always doing this twisty, bendy thing, so that you want kind of that effect going on, as it's twisting, as it's going down. Whereas more novice approach is usually just making it straight, right? There's no bend, there's no twist. There's not a lot of effective gravity or anything from it. That would be one thing to keep in mind. And you want to focus on establishing the overall form of that ribbon. Then just go in and pull out a couple of the individual strands. You don't need to do all the strands. Another thing would be to, we have a little really pointy head here. Oh, yay. Hey. Is kind of thinking of the hair in different sections. And I saw a little tutorial, I think it was on Pinterest, about this, and it was pretty good. It's like, think of it in, I think it was 4 sections. So you have the bangs, the hair right there in the front. Now me, not so much, I don't really have bangs. Then you have the hair in the top of the head, and then you have the hair on each side. And if you kind of approach drawing hair and you think about the individual parts like that, I have found that useful. So like maybe you think, oh, the bangs, I'm thinking maybe they have these long bangs kind of go off to the side. Then on the back, I'm thinking it kind of goes off the back like that. It's swept over to the side here. Then on this side, it's kind of longer. So the behavior of this one is more straight down, and it's got this sort of thing. And on this side, it's all swept behind that ear and goes off behind the head. So if you could sort of break down each section and you think about what that section is going to do, then you can get a bit more form and kind of volume and character out of it. I would also recommend looking up some anime hairstyles, and they have just all kinds of hairstyles. I was like a compilation of 100 different hairstyles. Like, oh, what if we make the bangs big and tall, and then what if the sides are shaved, and then what if he has a mohawk behind that? And you can start combining them in different ways to create different looks. But there you go. A couple of tips on hair. Question: when studying, should one exhaust one topic before moving to the next one, or should a study program include different aspects of drawing? If you want to focus on a single subject for a short time, that's probably fine. But I wouldn't want to do it at any extended time, because it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that it needs to be ingrained, or it needs to be, totally lost the word. You need to get whatever knowledge that you just learned from that approach and make it part of the whole of your knowledge and your process. And if you're working too long on that one thing, then there's the possibility that you're not connecting it in the chain. So you need to practice learning how to do the thing before it, do the things related to it, and how they go into that, and how you go out of that into the next thing. So I'm probably going to say a little more balanced, like maybe doing like 70-30, where like 70% of your time, maybe if you're wanting to learn, say you're wanting to draw portraits and you're getting better at portraits, 70% of the time, maybe you're drawing portraits. But I also feel like 30% of the time, draw some landscapes, draw some robots, something else, right? Give your brain a chance to sort of break from that, and it allows it to change and think about something else and then come back and approach it from a more fresh angle. I don't have any study or proof that that's the best way to do it. That's just advice from experience. Yeah. Nagatama says, if I was able to buy only one of your ebooks, which one should I pick? Oh, if you were just to pick one, of the ebooks, I guess it would really depend what your interest is. If you're interested and you like drawing characters, then I would say you're probably going to get the most out of the characters designing and drawing ebook. And if you want to go pick up some of that stuff, go do swatchesart.com. It's a little online store. It's got my videos and ebooks out there. So I've got a lot of good feedback on that one. People say that that's well made, a lot of good information in that. But the other ones can be exactly what you need if you're needing information on that subject. I know that's a terrible way to say it. But if you're struggling with lighting, the lighting ebook's the right call. If, struggling with colors is the right call. So it's hard to say which one is the best because they literally all cover different subjects. If you're just getting one of the videos, I'd almost say my last video is a really good one to pick up, which is painting process, because it breaks down the painting process into 10 steps, and I talk about what you should do at each stage. I give you examples of what it looks like at each stage, talk about things that you shouldn't do at each stage. And if you follow a logical progression and you're doing what you need to do at each point, then you'll find that your images will often flow easier. You're not having as much trial and error. You're not wasting as much time making changes. So that's a good option as well. Someone says, should I stick to a single software and master its tools, or should I learn to use multiple software? Software-wise, I don't see a lot of point in learning multiple similar programs. But knowing multiple programs that are varied is probably a good idea. For instance, I use Photoshop. I use Photoshop almost every time I do digital painting. I don't really find it worthwhile to go out and learn some other drawing program where I'm going to do the same thing and it's going to offer me basically the same options. Because I already know Photoshop so well. I've been using it for 2 decades, and I don't have to think about where anything is. I know all the shortcuts, and so I can just very freely move throughout it without having to think about the program. However, if you want to go learn, Blender for 3D rendering stuff, then there's not really an overlap there. They are not going to do the same thing. And would it be worthwhile to know how to do some 3D rendering and modeling in addition to 2D illustration? Absolutely. So you might want to go learn how to do that. Should you go learn how to use Adobe Premiere for video editing? If that's going to be, in your wheelhouse, then yeah, I don't see any problem with that. So yeah, if they're varied, then yeah, that's just more tools in your tool belt. But if they're really similar, The only reason I see that being an option is if you have, Photoshop on your home computer, but you use, Clip Studio on your iPad because you're traveling. In which case, sure, learn other programs because you're on a different device, a different interface in a different location. By the way, where can I find the color wheel and ebook on Color Again? Those should both be on swatchesart.com, or you can go to my Gumroad store, gumroad.com/swatches. One of the sites doesn't have the color wheel. I can't remember which one it is. Either that one or my QBrush store or ArtStation. One of them doesn't have it, so you'd have to check the other one if you don't see it there. I forget. But that is available. I've got some other free ones, a couple of free photo packs out there. Yeah. So. Esri says, my workflow is about 15 hours of work from sketching to painting a character, around 60 layers. Should I aim to sketch on rough rather than refined, or paint on as few layers as I can? Esri, no right answer on that one, because I know good illustrators who use both approaches. That is something that you're going to have to figure out based on the style that you like and based on the way that your brain works. If it likes having everything organized like that, then, everything on its own layer, then maybe that's the right call for you. I would recommend experimenting, though, and trying some other workflows. So there's several people that really are adamant about, I just, one layer or two layers, and then as soon as you're happy with that one, you merge it back down to one layer, and you just make your top layer on top of that one. So try that. See if that works. I generally find the more layers that I'm using, the less fresh my painting feels, because I'm constantly having to jump and find the layer and turn on a mask, turn off a mask, select this, select that. But if I'm just working on one layer, then I'm not doing all that, and I just get in the flow of painting the painting. And that can be great in some circumstances, but there's other times where you want to be really precise. So, not right, not wrong, but try it out a couple of different ways. And also, it's good to familiarize yourself, because there might come a time where you don't have the time to do that, or for whatever reason, you need to use a different workflow. Yep. Antonio says, hi, Clint. Thanks a lot for every tip given in... Whoa, and then it moved. Thanks a lot for every tip given in the stream. Well, you're welcome. I've got a question. What is needed to get the first job as a freelance illustrator in fantasy art? Okay, good question. There's not a firm answer because it changes based on every illustrator. Every illustrator has a little different story of how they got into it. But let's talk about what an art director, that person that would likely be contacting you, wanting your work, what they might be looking for, because if they find what they're looking for, there's very higher probability you're going to get a gig, right? So they want to see a level of proficiency. Is he a novice? Is he still struggling with the fundamentals? If he is, you're probably not going to be contacted. So make sure that you have the fundamentals down. Your work should show that you do not have gross anatomy mistakes. Not like, ooh, that's gross, but overt, obvious anatomy mistakes. You should show accurate proportions. You should show good execution in how finished the image is. There's a lot of people that put images on their galleries that honestly aren't finished yet. They really need to work another 10 or 20 hours refining all the brush strokes, refining the edges, and just cleaning things up. So make sure it has a good level of polish and it is a complete image in that regard, execution wise. Also, that you have at least 6 to 10 images in your portfolio. If you don't have that many images, then you're not as good of a bet for them, because they're like, has he just started? Has he not done enough work to even do, 6 images? And they're taking too big of a chance on that. So make sure that you fill up that much of your portfolio, and that should help. Also show that you have, I would say that you have to have a defined style, but you should have a main style. All right, if one piece is anime fan art, and the next piece is an ink splotchy sort of traditional piece, and the next piece is like a cartoony, cartoon strip sort of style, then they don't know what they're going to get if they hire you. So having several images, if not all of your images, having a very similar look, then that's going to be good for you as well. Having a level of consistency, so the images that you have in there should all be of a similar level as, the quality of the artwork. If the images are vastly, different, where you include the piece you did now, which is pretty good, but you also include that piece you did in high school 15 years ago, and it's just kind of a drawing, then they're not going to feel good about that. So that would be something else to look at. Saying that you got all that out there, you got your portfolio together, you got your images of your, the quality of your images up, you got the number up, and then it's exposure. Because if you created all the images and they're just sitting on your hard drive, what's the likelihood somebody's going to want to hire you? Pretty much zero. Because unless it's visible to somebody that's hiring, then they're not going to reach out to you. So you've got to be getting a little exposure, making sure that you're keeping your gallery up to date. It is having a gallery on multiple sites. I get contacted on all the different sites my galleries are on. ArtStation, DeviantArt, Facebook, maybe putting out on Instagram. Maybe you have your own Facebook art account, not just your personal one. So that sort of thing. Another way of getting some eyeballs on your work is doing big art competitions, because art directors often actually go out there and they watch and they look at some of the entries and they see if they can find some good new talent coming into the industry, and they will look to see your process and see what you came up with, and if they like it, they might contact you. Then the other part is you reaching out to clients, and you're always welcome to do that. Go figure out who their art submission person is, or what the email address is, or go to a big art event or Comic-Con or something similar and schedule a time with some of the art directors to have them look at your portfolio, give you some feedback, or if they like what they see, maybe they offer you a gig. So anyway, variety of ideas there. Hey, Clint. Okay, that was the one I just looked at. Fisk182 says, I'm starting my portfolio. Do you have any tutorial that helps me make a good presentation and workflow on big projects? You're starting a portfolio. Do I have any tutorial that helps make a good presentation and workflow on big projects? I don't think I do. Thinking if we covered that in some older episode. I know that I haven't really covered anything like that recently. I would check out, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by your question, but one of the places I would direct you to is Imagine Effects Magazine put out a free ebook on, I think it's like Create a Killer Portfolio. And it was a compilation of different articles, I believe, that had been in the magazine, but they put it into a free PDF. And so consider going out there and downloading that, finding that, downloading that, Imagine Effects Magazine, something with like Killer Portfolio. And reading that, you might find some points there. I have also come across a couple of different templates of concept art templates. That's like, okay, put your front pose here, put your, back pose, side pose here, put the name of the character here. And it's a PSD template where you basically drop in all of your elements. It already has the fonts at the right size and location. It has a little box marked off for maybe your study or color variations, that sort of thing. If you're talking about it on that line, then maybe that's what you need. It just has a professional layout for all your different images. And that can be a good way just to make a good presentation. So if you want to show how you handled your creative process or your concept art for your piece, then plugging them all into a nice professional template could be a good way of going about that. The other thing would be going out to like ArtStation and looking at some of the professionals and seeing how they display their work. They're seeing how they lay out their concept art, if that's what you're talking about, and see if you can't create a modified version of that would fit, your particular piece. All right, moving down. Let's see. Antonio says, "Thank you, man. Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you found it helpful. I follow you on the Art Fundamentals series, and I don't know how much to thank you. I'm glad you like them. I try to make those good entry videos that throw out a lot of good information to you and give people a good place to start from and get you just that core bit of knowledge you need to know to really jump into the subject." Mon says, kind of a silly question, but how do you color over line art? In Photoshop, if I'm doing coloring line art, and I'm keeping the line art, then I usually put the line art on a top layer, and I set the layer blending mode to multiply. And then in a underlayer, I will create what you call flats, where each major object is painted in one solid tone, and then I would make that onto its own layer, and I would lock that layer so that you can't paint out of that shape, and that way I can paint in each area and not have it affect any other area. That would be a very similar way that they do it in comic books. So you could look at how you color comic books, and you're going to get some good videos on that general process as well. Mm-hmm. But it's 8:53 on a Friday, so I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Guys, really great questions. I wasn't sure what I was going to be getting in this episode, but you guys came up with a lot of great questions, and I am planning on doing this again in 2 weeks if I'm not out of town. I will let you know on the groups, and we will do another short Vibrance episode. We'll follow it with a live stream, and we can take more Vibrance questions and art questions during that. Of course, next week we will have the conclusion to the double feature Siren and Enchanter Art Challenge, and we'll kick off a new challenge. If you want to vote on the subject for the next art challenge, that will be taking place next week on the Swatches art group. And if you have ideas for the subjects to put into the poll for the voting, then you can post those out on the Swatches Facebook group as well. And if you want to join that group, that is www.swatches.group, and it will send you to the Facebook group page. All right, I'll wrap it up there. Thanks again, everybody. I will catch you next time, and we might also collect some of your questions before the stream out on these Vibrance group. And that way we have a couple of queued up to answer while people are arriving next time. All right, thanks again. Catch you later.